Hi there, Booktube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And I've got no rhythm. Behind me you can see the nightlights of Tel Aviv, because it's evening time Thursday. I'm going to post this tomorrow, Friday. This is my Friday reads for this week. And before we get to the books that I've read and what I'm going to be reading over the weekend, I want to talk about a news item, a book-related prize that was given out this week, which is not one of the ones that gets talked about very much. No reason why it should. And it's not one I follow terribly, but the Goldsmiths prize was just awarded this week. I read in The Guardian. I'll link to the article in The Guardian, hopefully. And it was awarded to a book I was unaware of till now, a book by an author called Isabel Waidner, Waidner, and the book is called Sterling Carat Gold, Carat with a K. I don't know if anyone knows anything about Sterling Carat Gold by Isabel Waidner. Please leave a comment whether this is worth reading. I know nothing about it at all. But what I thought I would do is use this as an opportunity to talk about the Goldsmiths Prize, which is not one that anyone particularly follows. It's not one that I follow. You know, it's the kind of thing you hear about a prize, and not even, I think, one that I've ever gone out and bought a book because it won the Goldsmiths Prize. It's only been around since about 2013. Goldsmiths Prize named for Goldsmiths College, which is one of the colleges of the University of London. I think, I could be wrong, I think it is exclusively for mature students, but don't quote me on that. And they've given out this prize, and it seems the prize is, let me see what they term it, for fiction that opens up new possibilities for the novel form. Now, I'm going to talk through, I'm not going to go through every book in the shortlist, only starting in 2013. I won't go through every book that's been shortlisted, but we'll look at the winners and some of the books that were shortlisted, the ones that I recognize at least or have read, and see if there's any kind of pattern. I think some of the winners have been books that I've really struggled with, maybe books that could be loosely titled sort of difficult fiction, but then some of the books I think have been absolute, I never gone and read a book because of the Goldsmiths Prize, but I love finding these kind of prizes because sometimes when you're looking for a backlist book, they're a great way, if you feel some affinity with the books that have been shortlisted or have won, they're a great way of discovering authors or new to you books, new to you authors. So I'm not sure based on this list whether I can wholly trust it. As I say, some of the winners have been nightmare reads for me and some of them have been fantastic. But let's have a look. Back in 2013, the first winner of the Goldsmiths Prize was Emma McBride's A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, which I really didn't get on. I know some people love that book and gone on and read The Less Bohemians. I didn't. I read that short novel, really struggled, couldn't get on with the fragmented prose and not quite knowing whether I was coming and going. I couldn't get a handle on it at all, and so that, you know, that's not a red flag, but that's like, if that's the kind of thing the Goldsmiths Prize, fine, may not be exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the rest of that shortlist from 2013, and Jim Crace's Harvest there, which I really enjoyed. I think it was shortlisted for the Booker that year, which is why I read it, and there will be overlap. There's also a book by a chap, I believe, Lars Iyer, I-Y-E-R, called Exodus, which I've never heard of. There's David Peace's Red or Dead, which is one of the few David Peace I haven't read. There's an Ali Smith book I haven't read, Artful. They were also on the shortlist. In 2014, the prize was won, so Ali Smith shortlisted the first prize in 2013. She won the Goldsmiths Prize in 2014 with How to Be Both, which I adored. I loved How to Be Both, and it set me up for the seasonal quartet when she started publishing those, and I went through all of those, and I'm having a great time with Ali Smith. I'd read a couple of books previously. I'd read The Accidental, and then Book of Short Stories. Not Hotel World, which I always think it is, but it wasn't Hotel World. It was not that. Anyway, but it was How to Be Both, which made me believe that Ali Smith was someone worth following. So that won that year, but also nominated the same year was Rachel Cusk, which I've never read, which got Outline, the first in the trilogy, is that right? I haven't read any Rachel Cusk. Zia Haider Rahman's In the Light of What We Know, which I did read in paperback. I don't remember loving it. I think it was a standard, and I've forgotten mostly what it was about. But that was shortlisted that year as well. And Howard Jacobson, Book J, which I only read one. Howard Jacobson, didn't love it. 2015, the prize was awarded to Kevin Barry for Beetlebone, which I read. Middling book, I had read the winner in 2014, and I read the winner in 2015, Beetlebone. I like Beetlebone. I haven't gone on and read a lot more. Kevin Barry also nominated that year Magnus Mills for The Field of the Cloth of Gold, which I hadn't read, and I haven't read any Magnus Mills. Tom McCarthy's Satin Island, I read, there was a Tom McCarthy book nominated for the Booker Prize a couple of years later, right? See? Is that right? I think I read that. Max Porter's Grief is a Thing with Feathers, which I loved. Really, really. And that is, I think, for some, a difficult read. I don't think it's difficult in the way Emma McBride is difficult, but I loved Grief is a Thing with Feathers, and I've since read Lanny, and I'm fully on board the Max Porter train. 2016. Emma McBride was nominated again for The Lesser Bohemians, but that year Mike McCormack won for Solar Bones, which I never read. That book, the title is familiar to me, so I think it was shortlisted was it shortlisted for the Booker Prize that year? I don't know, but I didn't read it. There's a book here called by Sarah Ladipo Manika called Like a Mule, Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun, which I've never heard of. Another book by Anakana Schofield called Martin John and Other Stories, never heard of it, they were nominated, and Deborah Levy's Hot Milk, which I didn't read either, so that was 2016. In 2017, the prize was won by Nicola Barker for Happy in a Stylized capital H, A in capital A in brackets, then PPY, all in caps. I'm not aware. I read one Nicola Barker book, I read Wide Open, didn't love it so much, and haven't read more from her after that. Sarah Boehm, A Line Made by Walking Duck. Well, I read the other Sarah Boehm one, the one that's like All the Seasons but spelled badly. That was Sarah Boehm? I think so. And also nominated that year was John McGregor's Reservoir 13, which I think is a fantastic book. So that's the one I go for. There's a Will Self book here, Phone, which I haven't read. I've read a bit of Will Self. Not everyone's cup of tea, but I haven't read that one. But John McGregor, I see, was nominated for Reservoir 13 that year and didn't win. I haven't read the Nicola Barker book, but the John McGregor book, I think, deserved more plaudits. 2018, so there's another Rachel Cusk nominated. Guy Gunnaratney's In Our Mad and Furious City was nominated, which I didn't read a lot of people talking about the book. And the winner was Robin Robertson's The Long Take, which was shortlisted that year for the Booker Prize, which I did read. I read all the Booker shortlist in 2018. I think it was the last time I read all the Booker shortlist, I believe. Long Take, I think Robin Robertson is primarily a poet, and he wrote this sort of noirish poetry novel. I didn't really get it. It came. I got it in hardbacks. I got all 6 shortlisted books in a deal from the what used to be online. The Book People was the website in the UK, which is now defunct. But they used to do all 6 shortlisted hardbacks for a very heavily discounted price. So I picked that up, and it came in sort of square hardback. So it's different shaped. Anyway, that's what I remember about The Long Take. I don't remember very much about the reading experience. 2019, the winner of the Goldsmiths Prize in 2019 was Ducks Newburyport. It would be unfair of me to call it Ducks Bloody Newburyport or any other expedient. I struggled with Lucy Ellmann's book, and I read every single word of that 1,000-page mammoth, monstrous. The fact that this was driving me around the bend did not stop me from getting to the end of it, but the fact that it kept repeating, the fact that really, really got under my skin, and I did not enjoy the experience. The fact that the whole book would have served the exact same purpose, cut down by about 70%, and the fact that I just could not ever get back the month I spent reading Ducks Newburyport. Also shortlisted that year was Mark Haddon's The Porpoise. Now, Mark Haddon, famous for Curious Incident, The Dog in the Nighttime, a fantastic book. I saw the stage production in London with all my kids. Each one of them read the book when they were early independent readers, so that it was a key text for us, Curious Incident, because we all read it. My wife and I read it, and then the kids each went through it and loved it. And then on a rare occasion, we were all in London together, and we went to theatre, and we saw that it was the National Theatre production, which had transferred to the West End. I think a few months later, the theatre collapsed. We saw it, and it didn't collapse on us that day. Amazing production, amazing. So I picked up The Porpoise by Mark Haddon, and dreadful, really just strange. I think it was supposed to be a retelling of Shakespeare's Pericles, which I didn't know the story of Pericles at all. And the book went over my head, weird, trash, didn't get on with that at all. And then, I see also in 2019 that Isabel Wadner, who I'd never heard of until she won the prize this year, was also nominated for a book called We Are Made of Diamond Stuff. So I guess that would be, looking forward. What do you call it? When you say something and it comes true later. I'm such an old, words I can't think, words do. Okay. In 2020, so last year, the winner of the prize was M. John Harrison, The Sunken Land Begins to Rise Again. Anybody? I don't know. I apologise, Mr. Mr. Harrison, I don't know that. Also, so the entire shortlist last year seems to be completely oblivious. Paul Griffith's Mr. Beethoven. Xiaolo Guo, I'm butchering that name, A Lover's Discourse. First name is Xiaolu, last name Guo. From Shadow, I've never seen those letters put in that order before. Apologies, I don't know that book. I say M. John Harrison one. DBC Pierre, a shortlist of Meanwhile in Dopamine City. Didn't read that. Haven't read any DBC Pierre since he won the Booker Prize for Vernon Godlittle. And Monique Roffey's The Mermaid of Black Conch, which I know won the Women's Prize or won something, and there was a lot of talk. I haven't read it, but I've heard good things. That's the kind of thing I might pick up if I ever saw it. Anyway, I haven't read it. And then Anna Schofield again. Wait, did I say that? No, I didn't. We've seen her name already, like on this list. So she was also nominated for Bina, B-I-N-A, in 2020. And then the shortlist this year. So I said the winner this year was Isabel Waidner for Sterling Carrot Gold. Also on the shortlist, we've got Claire Louise Bennett's Checkout 19. I'm really looking forward to this. I love Claire Louise Bennett's Pond, and I'm definitely going to read Checkout 19. And the next nominee is Natasha Brown's Assembly. The word I was searching for before when I could not do words properly was, of course, foreshadowing, and Natasha Brown's Assembly being on this list is foreshadowing. And then other books, Keith Ridgway, A Shock, which I just saw. Eric Carl Anderson talking about, because Publishers Weekly, I think, listed it in their best books of 2021. I'll link to his. I just watched that video just before I sat down, and I just realised that's the book he's talking about. I don't know anything about Keith Ridgway's A Shock. Leonie Ross, This One Sky Day, don't know at all. Rebecca Watson, Little Scratch, all in lowercase, from Faber and Faber, don't know. So all I've done here is list a bunch of books, only some of which I'm familiar with, but just to give you a taste of what the Goldsmiths Prize is and how I use this and a bunch of other prizes. So, a lot of us on Booktube focus and follow the Booker Prize, and people have been remarkably read the entire long list or read the entire short list. And I think it's a great way to discover books and authors. And Bob the Booker is an absolute Booker expert, and he's gone back. I think he just put out a video about the very first Booker Prize, going through the entire shortlist. The first Booker Prize in when was that? The PH Newby one in the late 60s, early 70s, or whatever that is. And Kieran at KD Books is an absolute Booker fan. And I love all that. That's how I came into Booktube, watching those kind of videos. So I love those. But I look at all sorts of prizes, the Pulitzer and the National Book Award, National Book Critics Award, Goldsmiths, whatever, the what's the other one, the Wellcome Prize, anything where they're actually thinking critically about books in ways and surfacing authors that are new to me and books that I wouldn't come across. I always love dipping into these kind of things. Another thing which I'm thinking of making a video about is like every 10 years Granta has put out their 30 under 30, or was it 40 under 40, or 20 under 40, whatever it is, making lists of authors. I think the first one came out in 1983. I think it was 20 British authors under 40 that you should be following. And in 1983 they were talking about Ian McEwan and Martin Amis. 1983 is almost 40 years ago. So there have been 3 more of those every 10 years since. I think we're due another one in 2023. So there's 1993 and 2003 and 2013. And then they also started doing it for America. So there's 20 under 40 American authors, and they've done also for, I think, South America and places where I wouldn't recognize any of the names. But I thought what I might do starting next week is go back and look at those named authors, 20 authors that Granta picked out in 1983, and see, are any of those names still familiar to us? I've already given away that Martin Amis and Ian McEwan are on that list, and they definitely are. But I know there are some on there that I won't say didn't fulfill their potential, but what Granta is doing is trying to surface things, but also there's always. Virtue signaling is not a new thing. Even back then, there was some virtue signaling about the names they chose and trying to give credit to people. And some of those succeeded and some of those didn't. So I thought that might be a fun visit. Anyway, that's my talk about book lists and how I use book lists to surface backlisted books and come up with new suggestions. What I want to talk about now is everything I've read since we last spoke last week. So nonfiction November. So I'm really trying to focus on nonfiction. I'm going to, I know exactly on my to-be-read pile what is nonfiction. I've got some things that I want to get to, and this is great. So let me tell you where I am. This week I read The White Album by Joan Didion. I've been working my way, one of my 14,000 projects is to read her nonfiction. So I started many years ago. I read The Year of Magical Thinking when it came out, which is an astounding grief memoir, foreshadowing, and really just an astonishing bit of writing. And I kept hearing people talk about her journalism and her essays and what a voice she has. And so I read Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which I think is a quote from Yeats. I don't know why I'm saying. Maybe that's the Widening Guy. I'm getting mixed up. Anyway, and that was the title of her first collection. So that was essays all from the early 60s. And she just has the crystal clear. I think she is the journalistic equivalent of Karen Carpenter's voice. That absolute purity of singing voice that Karen Carpenter. I don't care whether you like the Carpenter's music or not. When you hear Karen Carpenter's voice, it is note perfect, just the voice of an angel singing, to me at least. Karen Carpenter, Barbara Streisand, I put in that thing, that category as well. It sounds like something heavenly to me, and that's that's the comparison I make with Didion's writing. Her essays in Slouching Towards Bethlehem were great, and this is the second. So this is from, I think this is published at the end of the 70s. This collection comes out, and it's looking back on the end of the 60s and through the 70s in a series of essays. It's just unbelievably good. And the title essay, The White Album, is the first one, about 50 pages long, and it talks about her marriage, which was going through a rocky patch at the time. It talks about her mental health, which was going through a rocky patch at the time. And as always, she's focused on California and Hollywood, and she touches on the murder of Sharon Tate. She touches on, she's at a recording session with The Doors, waiting for Jim Morrison to turn up. She just it manages to be an observer of what is happening at the time, but also somehow inside and part participating in what is happening. And it's just things, they call it the new journalism. This is the birth of everything we know now about how journalists are embedded in stories to the extent where they become part of something that all journalists are taught. You cannot be part of the story. You must always be an independent observer. And yet here, somehow, she is both coldly, dispassionately observing what is going on, and yet somehow inside it. At the end of this whole essay, where we've spoken about this and spoken about the Mansons and the people who are involved in Manson's crew. She's met with them and visited them in prison, and then we get this chilling thing where she says that she is godparent to a child with Roman Polanski. So simultaneously being outside, but somehow involved. It's just amazing. Everything in here is absolute gold. If you have any love for essay writing, journalism, and want to see the history of how we got to where we are today and the mess we are with journalism today, Joan Didion is just an amazing voice. I'm trying to work out where I go next after this. There's some non-fiction, which is there's Salvador and Miami, which are non-fictions, but one, I think, an entire book about one particular story, and then there are more collections of her essays and criticism and observations. So I don't know which I'm going to pick up next. I'll try and find them secondhand. This was hard to find secondhand, so I ended up buying this new from Amazon.co.uk, and it actually says in the back, and this is a lovely edition. So it's Fourth Estate, and this matches my edition of Slouching Towards Bethlehem. But it actually says in the back, printed in Great Britain by Amazon. So I'm guessing this was print on demand. I didn't realise that, and so. A Fourth Estate working with Amazon to do print on demand. I didn't know, but that's what I read. After that, I always like to do if you've watched this, you'll know that I do a lot of graphic novels, but Non-Fiction November, I fortunately had a non-fiction graphic memoir. And this is one that I've been meaning to get to for a long time. It's called The Arab of the Future by Riyad Sattouf. So this is the first part that I think that he's since published, the Arab of the Future 2, Arab of the Future 3. I think he's just published the Arab of the Future 4, and I think there's going to be a fifth and final installment. So this is a couple hundred pages, almost 200 pages. This is Riyad Sattouf. You've got there the little blonde kid with his parents don't cut his hair, is the writer and cartoonist, and this is his mother, who is a lovely French lady, and this is his father, who is Syrian, and this is because in the first part of the story they are living in Libya under Gaddafi in the late 70s, early 80s, I think that's when we're talking about. So style, let's talk about style first before content. The art is this very cartoonish. Just so you know, Riyad Sattouf was previously a cartoonist at Charlie Hebdo in Paris. He's now living in France, and this is actually translated from the French, so I should say that. So it's a graphic novel that's also in translation, translated by Sam Taylor. This is done the English translation. So originally published in French. The artwork is this very cartoonish, very stylized. That is our hero at the top there when he's a small child, I think 3-4 years old. We follow him in, and this is 1978 to 1984, so something. So we follow him from about 3 years old until he's 9. So all very early recollections of his life. And his parents, he traces the history of his parents. They meet in Paris studying, and then after they get married and after they have a baby, the father gets a job in Libya where he will be paid. He's an academic, and he's going to be paid a lot by they're encouraging people to come and teach in Libyan university, and for which he'll be well rewarded. Libya at the time is run by Gaddafi, and a strange place. There's a great insight into things that I certainly never knew about what Libya would have been like in those times. He's met at the airport and taken to the residence where he's going to be living, and they get inside, and his wife says, "Well, there's no lock on the door." And say, No homes in Libya have locks on the door. You can't lock your house from the inside because this is a socialist country where you can't own property, or property is theft, and this is just your home. And if someone else wants to come along and take it, then they do. So they don't realize this, and on the first day they all go out for a walk in the neighborhood and come back, and someone else, all their stuff is piled up outside the front door, and someone else has moved into the home they've been brought to, and they're told, well, just go find somewhere else. And from that point onwards, someone always has to stay at home for fear that someone else will try and get in and take everything. I think there's a bolt. I think you can bolt the place from the inside, but when you go out, you can't lock it behind you. So anyway, it's strange. I didn't know anything about this. They go from Libya back to Syria, which is where his father is from, and he goes back to his family where they have land, and his brother and his siblings. And the story plot is not a plot. The story memoir ensues. There's different color palettes for each society. So I think that's in we have blues and yellows, and then I think in Syria everything is this lovely red color. My problem, I was a little disappointed, I have to say. What we get is the portrait of a monster. Sattouf's father is an egomaniac dragging his family around. The picture of life, certainly in Syria, to a less degree in Libya, but in Syria, is really unpleasant. We see violence, we see animals being maltreated, we see women being mistreated, we see bullying, and just not a very flattering portrait of I don't know much about Syria, and maybe it was expecting too much to think this was going to be something that would open my eyes in ways that would make me believe something that we're all basically the same under the, well, I don't think we are all the same as what he's portraying Syria as. And as I say, his father's a bit of a monster and a bully and dragging the family around and bending them to his will. It's a little unpleasant. There's no, and of course the child is conflicted, loves his father and loves his mother, but actually I think overall it's not a sympathetic portrayal of the father, and we do come away thinking he's a bit of a monster, and the fact that there's more volumes of this after are not quite, at the end of this, it ends on a cliffhanger. They've been in France with his mother's mother, who's seems like a sane presence, and the mother's father, who's a philanderer and a sort of stereotypical Frenchman. But that may be a fair portrait of him, and ends with him, the father, saying, "Okay, now it's time to go back to Syria." And I'm not sure I could face more of what I had in this. I don't, maybe there are other places for it to go. But I'm not a fan of memoir being used to settle scores and to demonize the people we remember. And this may be a little weighted in that direction. So that's The Arab of the Future. I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to pick up the next volume, but if I was in a store and saw it for a reasonable sum, I may pick up number 2 just to see if it confirms what I already think that the author's goal is here. The Arab of the Future by Riyad Sattouf. After that, another disappointment. Again, not really foreshadowing here because I'm telling you about the book before I've even shown it to you. This is called The Breath of Sadness by Ian Ridley. And this is a grief memoir. So that was the foreshadowing from Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, which is referenced very heavily in this. He talks very much about Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking and why that influenced him to write this book. Ian Ridley, the start of the impetus for the book is the passing of his wife, Vicky Orvis, Orvice. It was a name I was not familiar with. Ian Ridley is a British journalist. His wife, Vicky Orvis, was also a British journalist. I think at one point she was the first woman employed by The Sun newspaper, those of you who know the UK are familiar with The Sun, to be a football correspondent, soccer. So in a man's world, she was a woman who knew what she liked and put herself forward for this and applied for this job, having she was working in some other part of the newspaper, and wanted to write about sport, or for you Americans, sports. Tragically, she died of cancer young, age 56, and they had been married. This was Ridley's second marriage, but they'd been together for I think 20 years, and married for at least half of that. And this is the story of the year after his wife's tragic passing. We also watch her decline, and then together dealing with cancer after she passes away. The breath of sadness is taken from a tweet that he tweeted within about 3 hours of his wife passing, and it says, "My beloved, bright, brilliant wife, Vicky Orvis, passed away at 5 a.m., able to defy the cancer no longer. I am bereft, empty, but grateful for her life and her love. Those who feel the breath of sadness sit down next to me." And I hadn't realized until I read the tweet where that quote, "the breath of sadness," comes from. It's a song by James called "Sit Down," and it's a line from the song, "Those who feel the breath of sadness sit down next to me." I think it's a beautiful line. I think it's poignantly used in the tweet, and it's a great title for this memoir. The book itself, I think, I don't want to detract at all from what he's gone through. So why is that cricket thing in this? And probably the reason I picked up, not that I have a problem at all. I like no problem with a grief memoir. I'm still 7 years after my father passed away. I'm still processing my grief, I think, in a relatively healthy way, but it lives with me, and it's something I'm aware of, and I don't mind. I enjoy is a strong word, but I like reading about other people and dealing with death and grief. And this had a cricket element, because one of the things he decides to do in a year following his wife, they'd shared an interest in sport. She was a soccer correspondent. He'd done some cricket journalism, and they had gone to cricket matches together. And so he decides that this year, when he can't bring himself to leave the house and he's just totally bereft, that one of the things he's going to do is go and watch a certain amount of live cricket, and it's county cricket, so not international matches, not the big test matches or one days, but he's going to go and watch local county cricket. And all round England these games take place with very little fanfare, and mostly the games outside London, very small audiences watching whole days of cricket midweek, and that's the kind of world that he wants to inhabit, and that's how he's going to process his grief. And I was totally there for that part of the story. I think that in some ways this may be too close to. He may be writing this too close, where he hasn't really processed things yet, and so we go through that with him. There's a lot of therapy speak, a lot of sessions with his therapist, a lot of ups and downs and triggers that he relates, him being triggered and breaking down in tears and not wanting to see lots of people and not. And my problem with it is I think it doesn't succeed in the thing that I guess grief memoir is meant to do, which is to universalize one's experience and make it valuable for other people reading this, which is not to take anything away from his personal experience of going through this traumatic losing a life partner. I just think as a book, it didn't wholly succeed for me. I read it. I think he can write certainly, but I think that I think for me in reading something like this, I want there to be something universally recognizable. I don't want to spend this year or 300 pages in this person's grief and sadness. I don't want to take anything away from it. I don't want to begrudge him that. It's just for me to read it as a book. I think there needed to be more for someone else, someone who didn't know Ian Ridley, didn't know Vicky Orvis, to say that this is something that we can all share. This is a universal experience. I think it's a very personal experience. I think it's a very sad book. I think the title's great, but it wasn't a great success for me. That's The Breath of Sadness by Ian Ridley, on love, grief, and cricket. And then, so I said I'm going to read non-fictional this month, but I bought a book. A friend of ours who lives here was going back to London. It's actually one of my oldest friend's mothers who lives around the corner to me here in Israel. One of my oldest friends from London who I grew up with, she lives there, but her mother now lives in Israel. And she was going back to London and she was getting together with my mum because they became friends. Even though I've known this woman's daughter for 40 years, our parents never knew each other. But when my mum was here and she was here, and they're both widows in the last 5-7 years, my mum was a widow for 7 years, and this woman for the last couple of years. We set them up on a play date, and they become friends. Anyway, she was back in London. She met up with my mum, and knowing this, I sneakily sent a book to my mum's house, and then asked, "Listen, if you're already seeing her, it's only a tiny thing. Would you mind?" Anyway, I bought Natasha Brown's Assembly, which, foreshadowing from the only thing shortlisted for the Goldsmiths prize this year, didn't win it, but I picked this up on eBay, and it's a brand new. This would be £12.99, so that's a cheap because it's 100 pages. That's why a brand new hardback is only £12.99. But I bought this on eBay, and I can tell you that you can find bargains this year. I like new books, and I found this on eBay for £6.55, including shipping. So that is exactly half price, 50% off. Brand new hardback out this year, shortlisted for lots of prizes and much talked about. And I'm going to whiz through this over the weekend. And then I think going back to, so this is a sort of fiction breather in the middle of my non-fiction November. And after this, I think I'm going to try the George Saunders book, which I've had sitting there since I picked it up. I bought it a while ago, and I picked it up from London in June. And I'm going to read that. The George Saunders with all the Russian short stories and the criticism. I think that counts as non-fiction, right? It's sort of literary criticism, it's not. Anyway, I'm reading that next, I think. And that's all I've got for you this week. Flipping 33 minutes. Bye.